Legal Resource Center. I'm very happy to be with you today, and I'm going to try and get something off my screen here. There we go. So we're here to talk about advocacy in adverse situations. And just some tips and some things to think about. And I'm really doing this from a parent experience perspective. Just some lessons, rules of the road that I learned in the 20 years that I've been doing health insurance advocacy for people with autism. And also, you know, let's face it, we're all advocates for our loved ones as well as parents of someone with autism or any other type of disability. And so in navigating all of the systems that we have to interact with, it's just really helpful to have some tools in your tool belt to be able to do some of those, advocacy for your loved ones and yourself, quite frankly, in some situations where it might not be ideal. I've been through a due process with our school district. Indiana was the first state in the country to pass health insurance reform that required health insurance companies to cover autism treatment, including ABA. And I was the sole advocate who worked on the implementation of our mandate law 20 years ago. Before there was an Autism Speaks, before there was a roadmap, no one had done this before. And so we were successful in getting our bill passed, but then all the insurance companies just said, we're not going to follow it. And so I had to go on behalf of my daughter through all of those steps to get them to comply with that law and to make sure that they were complying with that law in the way it was intended. And so that was 6 years of full-time work on behalf of our community to get our mandate law implemented and to get through the administrative law courts and get through the Department of Insurance appeals processes and advocacy work there to finally get a document called Bulletin 136 put together that told our insurance companies what they needed to do to adequately comply with that law. So that was such a tremendous learning experience as a person, as a professional, as a mom, as an advocate. And so I want to share some of that experience with you to do what autism parents have always done, which is try to make life a little easier for the parents that come next. So I'm very grateful to the parents that came before me and made my road easier. And so I want to pay that forward and try to make people's roads a little bit easier as well. I do want to ask really quickly if you can put in the chat and Shannon, you can kind of let me know how many folks on the line here are parents, and then how many are professionals who may be advocating with insurance companies and peer-to-peer calls, or maybe helping parents advocate either with schools or with insurance companies. So if you can just pop that in as I move forward, and just so I kind of get a little sense of who I'm talking to, and I'm happy to see your faces. I asked Shannon to make sure that I could see some people because I gave a talk a few weeks ago and I was just talking to a PowerPoint screen and it was very weird. So I'm happy to see your faces, and thank you again for sharing this hour with us. And I hope that this will be very helpful. So. Good job. Let me figure out really quick how to advance myself. There we go. So love the Rolling Stones and the wisdom of the Rolling Stones. And I sing this song to my daughter sometimes. You can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you just might find you get what you need. And I think this is really important when you're looking at advocacy. Because it's not about winning every single battle. It's really understanding, what are you after? What's your end game? What's your end goal? What do you really need to get out of this situation? And so if you can really pinpoint that for yourself, regardless of the advocacy situation or even the relationship that you're trying to negotiate in. Every relationship is a negotiation, whether it's a marriage or whether it's with a provider of therapy or whether it's with your school district or what have you. Relationships are all about negotiation. And so if you can hone some of your negotiation skills and really be able to pinpoint what really are you needing and wanting from this situation, it will really help your advocacy, because then you'll know what's important to you and what you're willing to give up, because you can't get everything you want out of a negotiation. So you have to know what you're really wanting to give up and what you can give up. The other thing that I would say has been so helpful to me is this book by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a pretty easy read. It's been around forever. It was a book that we were required to read in graduate school, but it's not a graduate text or anything dry. And it really helps you look at how to prioritize, how to understand what you're really after, and then how to be effective in getting it. In many contexts, whether it's in your family, in your relationships, or in your work, or in your advocacy. So, and one of the key habits of highly effective people is beginning with the end in mind, really understanding what their end game is, what they want or need out of a situation or a negotiation, and then really focusing on how to get there. And so I found this book to be really helpful and would highly recommend it. And for the purposes of today, beginning with the end in mind and really focusing on, out of this advocacy situation, what do I really need? What do I really want? So you have to ask yourself, what are the results that you're trying to accomplish? What do you really need? What are you willing to give up? What are the must-haves? What are the non-negotiables? In every situation, there's going to be something that really is a deal breaker, that's going to be important to you or to your loved one or to the community you're advocating for. And so keep that in mind and make sure that you're not putting that in jeopardy because you're fighting over some battle that really isn't as important or really isn't a deal breaker. So again, and we're human. We all have different personalities, and sometimes we enter into a conversation or a meeting or a negotiation with someone, and they're not someone that we find to be very, quite frankly, likable. And that's okay. Not everybody likes me. I don't like everybody. That's life. That's humanity. And so by keeping the end in mind, you can work more effectively at keeping personalities out of things and keeping some of those emotions that aren't helpful out of the negotiation. It's to really focus on the end game. And that's not always easy. Absolutely is not always easy, but it is more effective. And so it's worth the effort to try to do that. Another thing I want you to think about, what do you see here? Do you see a human being or do you see a roadblock? When you're in a meeting with your school district, or you're in a meeting with your provider, or you're in a meeting with your pediatrician, or you're in a meeting with someone who is working for a social services organization and you need to access services through them. Do you see a human first, or do you see someone who's in your way or something that's in your way? Try to see the humanity in them first, because if we start looking at people as just tools or roadblocks, we get into a situation where we forget about their humanity, and then it becomes easy for them to forget about our humanity and our loved ones' humanity, and that they are working not on behalf of a case, but on behalf of a child, or not on behalf of a budget, but on behalf of a classroom. And so it's kind of one of those things that if you helped create that environment of keeping things at a human to human level, hopefully they will respond in kind. And as we all know, there's one person we can control, and that's ourselves. We can't control how they're going to respond. We can't control their personality or how they're going to react or act about something, but we can control what we put into it. So if we can keep the humanity in this process, I believe it reaps results and it makes things a little bit easier for all involved. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those things as we go through some more specifics. And I think also too, when it's a situation, you know, we've all been through a pandemic. There are a lot of things that are pretty heated right now. And we had on, you may have seen on the news in Tennessee, a school district, big controversy about masking or no masking. And some individuals actually followed people who were wearing masks out to their car and verbally threatened them because they were wearing masks and they were advocating for masks. They weren't seeing their humanity. They were seeing them as roadblocks. They were seeing them as roadblocks to their choice and their freedom instead of seeing them as humans. And I think all of us who were not in that situation or at that meeting and weren't emotionally invested in that meeting can be aghast and say, oh my gosh, how could they follow those people out to their car and threaten them just because they wanted to advocate for a public health measure that they felt was important? Well, I think it comes down to this, seeing them as roadblocks and seeing them as a barrier and seeing them as taking something away from them, as opposed to seeing their humanity first. So that's kind of how that can come into play and keep things focused on what's really important versus allowing things to get out of hand and get to a point where you have situations like that are so unfortunate and unnecessary, really. So we'll keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is when I was working in healthcare before becoming an insurance advocate for people with autism, one of the things that we always talked about, we had to constantly negotiate with very smart professionals to get certain things done. And one of the things that one of my mentors always talked about was that if everybody's a little bit unhappy with an outcome, then it's probably a good outcome. It's probably fair, and it's probably the outcome that was best negotiated. Because if one entity or one side gets everything they want, that's probably not a good outcome. So just be prepared to know you're not going to get every single thing you think you want out of a situation. But if you focus on what's really important to you and getting out of that situation, that can really help you avoid some of the unnecessary battles and fights and lose the war, so to speak, because you weren't focusing on the big picture or the end game. And so some tips to help do that is, go ahead and ask them to walk in your shoes, share stories, do a little bit to get to know each other, and also ask them too, what are your goals? What do you need out of this? Because then that will help show you where your common ground is. And so you don't have to fight about the common ground. You can use the common ground as kind of the foundation to build a good result that makes both sides a little bit unhappy, but mostly happy. And, if we get through life being mostly happy with the outcomes of what we've, worked on, I think that's a good result. That's a good result. So that's some tactics that I have used and some strategies that I have used in terms of going into a due process or going into another type of negotiation that already is fraught with a little bit of animosity, a little bit of us, them, a little bit of your side, my side, and trying to really bring it back to what can we all agree on? Let's build on that. So, and then there may be times where you may have to, and I always suggest people, especially parents, see if they can take an advocate with them to help. But there may be times where either you or an advocate that you take with you or someone involved in the meeting may say, hey, let's take a breath. Let's take a step back and let's talk about again why we're all here. Let's remind ourselves what our goals are, who we're here to help, why we're here to help, and how we can make that happen. Because sometimes you do get caught up in trying to negotiate a detail and it starts to kind of go off the rails a little bit. And so it's really good to circle back and say, let's remember why we're here. Let's remember that we have common goals here. So you're going to hear a little bit of ABA therapy going on in the background of the house. So I apologize for the background noise, but hey, that's life right now. So here goes my girl. The other thing that's really helpful in some of these adverse situations is facts are facts. You know, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but we are not all entitled to our own set of facts. That just is what it is. So if we can help to frame situations and work in adverse situations by bringing good, solid, reliable, truthful information and data to the negotiation, that will always work in your favor. Exaggerating does not. Getting information from unreliable sources does not. It just hurts your credibility. And then it makes your next negotiation with that same person or entity or system or school district that much more difficult. So make sure that you get your information from reliable sources, from advocacy organizations that are required ethically to vet their information before they put it on the websites or put it out on social media. Social media can be a wonderful thing for connecting with people, but it's a very dangerous thing when it comes to facts, data, and reliable information, because you don't have to have any expertise or training or knowledge of a particular issue before you can go ahead and post about it on social media and share information and put information out there that may be completely wrong and may have not been vetted and maybe not truthful and may be specifically created to misinform people for financial gain. So be very careful about where you get your information and make sure that you do get it from reliable sources. And then also ask them to do the same. You know, if they present, well, we can't do this because of XYZ. Well, can you show me the data to support that? Can you show me the regulation that actually says that? I've been in meetings where, you know, someone from a school district said, well, it's school policy that we cannot do this. Okay, well, thank you for notifying me about that. Can you please show me the specific policy of the school? Can you show me the specific board policy of the organization that states that this is not something that we can do? And sometimes there was a policy and sometimes there was no policy. They just thought there was a policy, or they didn't really know their own policy. You know, we're human, we make mistakes. We sometimes misinterpret things. And so if you walk with them through looking at what really are the policies and the rules and the regulations, what really are the parameters that we have to work within to make this happen, then you're sharing information and you're getting to the facts and you're getting to the truth, as opposed to together, as opposed to fighting each other about what the truth is. So that's why data and documentation is so helpful, and having reliable information is so helpful when you're trying to negotiate with someone else. So these are some of my favorite questions during a negotiation. And again, you know, the way you say things is also going to help or hurt your negotiation. So do be sure to be tactful. I've been in meetings where for example, when we were doing the test case for the autism mandate here in Indiana, I was the only consumer or family patient representative on a committee of 20 people who were going to negotiate this Bulletin 136. And all of the other 20 people were lawyers and lobbyists for the insurance industry. So it was basically 19-1 on this committee. And so I couldn't go in there and when the insurance company said to me, well, every ABA provider always prescribes 40 hours a week of ABA for everybody. I couldn't say liar. That wouldn't have gotten me anywhere. I knew that wasn't true. He probably knew it wasn't true, but it wouldn't help my situation to call him a liar or to get angry. I said, oh, I bet you have a lot of data on that. Can you please show me that data? Let's make sure we're speaking about accurate assessments of what will be prescribed. Can you show me that data? Well, they couldn't find any data, so I got some data about, I had some providers who were very happy to share redacted, no identifying information, but, patient 1, patient 2, patient 3, and how many hours they were prescribed. And guess what? It wasn't all 40 hours a week. And so we were able to demonstrate that the data showed, it wasn't me being right and him being wrong. It was just, here's some data that shows that these are the facts. And so that can be a really helpful approach as well, to take some of the clash out of things and to take some of the personality clash out of things. This is one of my daughter's favorite movies here. Emotions and advocacy. I definitely want to talk about this a little bit for many reasons. One of the first meetings that I went to advocate for my daughter to get her health insurance coverage for ABA therapy, it was myself and about 7 or 8 other people from the HMO that we were in at the time. And immediately at the beginning of the meeting, the medical director leaned into me and said, it must be just devastating to have a child with autism. I can't even imagine how devastated you are. And I don't know if he was trying to connect and to be sympathetic, or if he was trying to undermine me and make me cry and be emotional and kind of throw me off my game, so to speak. I don't know what his intentions were, but it could have gone either way. And I could have reacted to it in many different ways. And for me, what worked was to say, I think you can only imagine it if you've walked in my shoes. But you know what we're here to talk about is insurance coverage. And I would be so happy to come back and train your staff on what it's like to be a parent of a child with autism. But I want to talk about coverage right now. And thank you for your sympathy. So I thanked him, even though I didn't know what his intentions were, and offered to be a resource and offered to be a help for him, but put everybody's focus and my focus back on the issue at hand that day, which was they were not complying with our mandate law and they needed to, and how were we going to work together to make that happen? So emotions are not, they're not bad. They are what they are, and you feel what you feel. You're going to be in a meeting and someone's going to make you angry. One of the lobbyists used to call me the stubborn housewife from Carmel. Oh no, he called me the little stubborn housewife from Carmel. I'm 5 feet tall. I know I'm short. That wasn't big news to me. And so I could be angry about that, or I chose to think it was funny. And so then I kind of started trying to use it to my advantage. So I wore a cute little pink suit to every meeting, but under that cute little pink suit, I wore this, and hopefully you can read it. Says, women who behave rarely make history. So I wore my cute little pink suit, but then I had this pretty, I don't know if I can't say bad ASS because my daughter's here, but then I had this underneath. So that kind of made me feel better. And when you feel better in a meeting, then you're going to be able to negotiate better. So your emotions are what they are, but the only thing you can control is how you choose to use that emotion and how you choose to act versus react. When he called me the little stubborn housewife from Carmel, my initial reaction was, probably a few words I can't say because my daughter's here and it would be inappropriate. But I had to choose to not react like that, but choose to act and take that as motivation and learn to laugh about it. And so, and we still laugh about it too, to this day. And after the end of that whole 6-year process, the same lobbyist came up to me later and said, I underestimated you. You really know your stuff. And that was great. And I still see him once in a while, and we, you know, I'd go have a beer or a glass of wine with the guy, you know, it all worked out great. But part of the success of that was choosing to act and use that insult or what have you to act, not react. And then again, I want to say just a little bit about social media, because social media has changed a lot about how we communicate. It's kind of narrowed everything into little bite-sized communications that don't have a lot of layers or nuance. And I think in some ways that's changed how we speak and act with people when we do get the chance to be face-to-face. And so just be aware of that. People say all the time, you know, wow, people put things on Facebook or Nextdoor or tweet things that they would never say to somebody's face. And I think we're kind of getting away from that and starting to say things to each other's faces that maybe before social media we wouldn't. And again, social media is not bad. It's how we choose to use it. So we have to take the responsibility to use it responsibly, to use it appropriately, to use it in a way that enhances our humanity and enhances our effectiveness, and not the other way around. So, so just be aware of that when you're negotiating and when you are in a room with human beings, or if you are, you know, right now we're doing IEP meetings virtually, so we're not in the room and we can't see those, we can't see and experience that nonverbal communication that is so important. So try to be aware of that and of keeping that in the back of your mind, that even though we may be in little boxes on computers, we're still human beings behind that. And so we have to make sure that we keep that human piece of it and keep that mutual respect for each other as human beings as part of this process. Because we don't have to give in to our instincts. We have choices. We have choices to follow a path that enhances things and is respectful of each other. So, and again, that's more effective. That's going to be better at getting you what you want and getting you what you need than taking a different path. So we'll just be aware of that. Now, with that said, like I said before, you can't control how they're going to act, and you can't control how they're going to react, or if they are going to behave in a manner that is professional or is appropriate or is kind and human enhancing. So you just have to kind of be prepared that that is going to be a possibility, and decide that, you know, that you're not going to contribute to that, and you're going to try to turn it around and turn it back to being a more respectful and more appropriate conversation. And so some tools that have worked for me in doing that is acknowledging this is not easy. When it's your child, or it's a crisis situation, or it's an issue that's so important to you that you've been putting your blood, sweat, and tears and money into for years, it's tough. It's tough. You put a lot into this. It's important to you. And so acknowledge that. It is. It's okay. But we can still do this in a way that we don't have to let their emotions run it off the rails or our emotions run it off the rails. Breathe, take a moment. If a meeting's getting heated, don't be afraid to say, you know what? Hey, you know, we're all human here. We all have important stakes in this. we're getting a little off track here. Let's together take a breath, grab some water, take a break for a second from Zoom, get some water, come back. Let's try to refocus on what we're all trying to do together. That's okay to do that. And, sometimes that's just what everybody needs, is to take a moment and just say, whew, why am I here? Am I contributing to this? Am I getting to the end game, getting to the thing that's really important about this negotiation? And then one thing that helped me a lot, when it is your child, they're your baby, and it doesn't matter if they're 23 or they're 2, they're still your baby. And you don't want people being negative about them or telling you all the time what they can't do, or that they're not worth spending money on for health insurance, or that you can't cure them anyway. So why should we have to cover them? That's really hard to hear as a parent. And so one thing that helped me was to kind of compartmentalize that and just think of my daughter as my most important client I've ever had, and step back a little bit from those emotions. And that worked for me. That might not work for everybody, but compartmentalizing things like that during the actual process of negotiation helped me be able to focus on what I really wanted and needed for her and for all the other kids who were not getting their treatment. And then I would come back later and process it with my husband and allow those emotions to get expressed and to work through them outside of the negotiation. So find a partner that you can do that with. It might be your spouse, it might be a friend, it might be a sibling, it might be another advocate, but find someone that you can process those emotions with and do it in a healthy way. And then, and then you can kind of really focus when you need to on the negotiation process. I've experienced attempts at bullying in meetings, and that's going to happen. That will happen. And so, definitely prepare yourself for that. It could happen. And if you have someone that partner that you can work through things with, practice a couple things that you could do or say if it does happen, so that it doesn't take you off guard. It's kind of all about preparation. So it doesn't take you off guard, and you can turn the situation back to what you're trying to negotiate. And you know what? Ignoring bad behavior, that's what they taught us in ABA therapy and parent training, ignoring bad behavior and refocusing things onto what the issue at hand is, works on adults as well. So, just don't allow someone who's trying to bully you to draw you into that. Ignore their bad behavior. Let's refocus back on what our issue at hand is. Let's refocus back on the kids. Let's refocus back on this issue. And let's see what we can do to come together to bring us to the next step, or to a conclusion, or to something we can all live with, as opposed to letting things degrade into a bullying or a bad mouthing or back and forth situation that isn't really serving a purpose other than to derail things. And then just a couple things about some of the little big things. I read a story about a parent or about a teacher who went into a parent-teacher conference, and the mom and dad came in, and dad had on a beer company t-shirt with some really inappropriate language. When you go into a meeting, you don't have to be in a suit. You don't have to, on Zoom, we all just have to look good from the waist up. But do dress credibly. Doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be a fashion show or anything like that, but just make sure that it communicates to the room that you are serious about your issue, or you are serious about the need or the piece of the puzzle you're trying to negotiate, and just make sure it's appropriate, because you don't want whatever you're wearing or whatever you're presenting yourself as to distract from your goal. So it's not about putting aside your self-expression or putting aside your personality or anything like that, but it is about, if your goal is to negotiate something, then if whatever you're wearing detracts from that or communicates something about you that isn't accurate or isn't going to help the situation, don't wear it. So just kind of try to dress credibly. Tone and pace of voice. I am a quick talker and I talk with my hands. So there was something I had to work on to make sure it wasn't a distractor and to make sure that I was getting my point across and not coming off as hurried or nervous or more emotional than I really was. Because let's face it, as women, a lot of times people are going to assume that we're more emotional than we are, or that if we speak quickly or we're anxious or, what have you. So don't be afraid to breathe. Don't be afraid to take a moment. And if you know something, like I know about myself, that I talk too fast, I talk with my hands, sometimes that's distracting. And so that was something I chose to try to work on. So it wouldn't be distracting to what I was trying to achieve in the meeting. And then muffin diplomacy. I have found in many situations that just doing a little act of kindness can help set the stage to have everyone bring to the table an attitude of being there to be helpful to each other and tone down maybe some of the us them type of situation. It's hard to be mad at somebody that brings you cookies or muffins. It really is. And so, and also it's when you're especially working with an organization or social services for the state or Social Security. And it's hard to do some of this stuff, obviously, with the pandemic. But there are ways to do little acts of kindness that can show them that you do appreciate their position, you do appreciate what they do for you or your community, your child, your industry, what have you. And that you also appreciate that they can't control everything about the situation either. For example, when I was applying for the waiver for my daughter here in Indiana, I wasn't really sure about the paperwork. And so I decided, well, I'm taking off work. I'm going to drive down there in person, bring a basket of muffins and ask for help. And it went really well. And they were so grateful to have somebody bring them something, anything. It could be a card, it could be, if we're doing face-to-face meetings and you could bring muffins or whatnot, that helps too. But just something, some little act of kindness so that they know that you appreciate them as a person and as someone who can help you. And so that goes a long way, and it doesn't have to be anything grand or extravagant or expensive. It can just be something that it could even be a smile and I get that this is a tough position for you to be in. I get that. How can we work together? Just some kind of acknowledgement and little act of kindness goes a long, long way. So, just in conclusion, and Shannon, I think we can unmute people now, is just, for Q&A, is just that preparation, knowing yourself and trying to prepare for some of the scenarios that you might come up with. And then that common ground. It's not about a battle and you win and I lose, or I win and you lose. There's always a way for there to be a situation where everybody gets a little bit of what they want, not everything, but get enough of what they want to be satisfied. And then again, those facts, data, documentation from reliable sources, and then that end in mind, keeping that end in mind. What is your true goal here? And just one last note that I'll say is, you definitely have to pick your battles, but there are some big things that you might need to stick your ground on. And I think you can do that very tactfully. And again, that's where that documentation, the facts and the data are your best friend. Just for an example, my daughter's 23. And so when about 15 years ago, we got a medical release letter from her doctor to leave public school at noon to go do her ABA therapy part-time. And so the teacher said, no, she can't do that. The principal said, no, she can't do that. We don't allow that for autism. We don't allow that for ABA. It's a school policy. So I asked to see the policy. Nobody could really find a policy. So I asked to see their, what kind of policies they do for medical release for all medical conditions. Well, guess what? Every other medical condition could get early release from school to attend medically necessary therapy. So this went to the special education director. It went all the way up to the superintendent. And the superintendent said, autism is not a medical condition. ABA therapy is not a therapy. It's just tutoring. She can't leave school for just tutoring. Well, that was a big hill I was willing to die on. So we did the process. We tried negotiation. It did not work. The facts were on our side. So we documented all the facts, why it's a medical condition, why ABA is a medical treatment, all of their own policies about medical release. And then our lawyer wrote a very nice, lovely letter that was very tactful and was not at all threatening, but just said, these are the facts, and we will be taking this to the next level if we cannot reach an agreement. And that next level will include holding school personnel who are blocking this patient from getting their medical care, holding them personally responsible for medical neglect and abuse. We don't want to do this. That would be awful for all involved, but that is our only option if we can't negotiate. Well, the next day she got her medical release to go to ABA therapy and all was well. So that was, it's not a tactic I recommend using first, but there are big battles that do need to be won, that you do need to stick to your guns on, but make sure you've got your data, make sure you've got your facts, and make sure you do it tactfully. There is a way to do those things tactfully. And that really worked in our favor. And so she was able to get what she needed. And the relationship with the school was not damaged in any irreplaceable we didn't damage the relationship with the school, which was important because she had to go there and we wanted her to be treated well. So so that was just a little example or a big example of when, just really had to stick to our guns there. So if anybody has any questions or something they would like to discuss, this is my contact information, and thank you so much for sharing this time with me. And please let me know what questions you have and we can have a little Q&A and discussion. And don't be shy. Okay, we've got a lot of parent educators, got some providers, parents, BCBAs. Hello, BCBAs. Okay, is everybody being shy? If you don't want to unmute yourself and would rather put a question in the chat, feel free to do that as well. Because I believe I will be able to see that, or I'll have Shannon jump on and let me know. Okay, let's see. Do you have any resources handy for autism and the transition to adulthood? The ARC of Indiana that I am a contractor for has, and the ARC National has a lot of information on their websites about transition into adulthood. And the ARC National, and ARC is A-R-C, as in cat, has a tremendous online tool where families can go in and put in a lot of information and planning documents. And it's something that through secure passwords can be shared with other family members. Like, for example, if something happens to me, my sister would take guardianship with my daughter. And so she's able to share in that information and not have to go find paperwork. So that's a really wonderful tool. But I would definitely say look at the ARC National website. If you're in Indiana, look at the ARC of Indiana's website, because every state's a little different in how they do waivers and different adult services. And I would also look at Autism Speaks website. They have a lot of information on transition to adulthood as well. Let's see. Let's see. I have in California, we have independent studies for kids who want to stay home, but it's not being explained for special ed. Okay, I'm not sure what the question is with that, but yeah, there are a lot of different ways that our loved ones with autism in working with the school system can access their free and appropriate public education. And, certainly homeschooling is one, virtual schooling, definitely is one. I think you're right. A lot of the options for students who are in special ed are not necessarily explained really well. And so I think that's really important that in your state, you get connected to your state advocacy organizations and encourage parents that you work with to get connected to their state advocacy organizations, because they will have relationships with people in the system and also can help explain those things parent to parent. And have a little bit more freedom, maybe sometimes in how they message things, and give accurate information as well. So I think I would say one big thing is to really encourage parents to get connected to their local state advocacy organizations, not only with autism, but also with just disabilities, developmental disabilities in general, because that's, kind of a common issue for all folks with special needs. And so the non-autism disability advocacy organizations will have really good information on that as well. And then a third thing I would suggest is every state has in Indiana, we call it InSource, but it's basically a federally funded group of advocates and educators who work with parents who have kids with special needs in the public school system to know their rights and to understand the system. And so getting them connected to that will really help give them another avenue to get good information about what some of the true options are in terms of educating their child. So.
May I add to the question?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes, well, most parents do not know that they have the option for independent study. Well, they're calling it independent study. They don't want to call it distance learning because it's very different than last year. But an independent study, it's basically it's maybe an online program, and then your parents are pretty much left to do everything. But with special ed, a lot of families feel like they cannot. And so since they're not offering OT, speech, and all those other services, they feel like they can't choose this option. So that's what I wanted to see, where we can find information or help in getting clarification and getting the appropriate independent studies program for children with special ed.
Yeah. I think that probably your best bet are some of your state-based advocacy organizations, because I know that the system in California is a little bit different than, say, like the system in Indiana is very different than the system in California. And so I think it's going to be really important to connect with your state-based advocacy organizations to get the most accurate information about what the options are, and then also engage with them to help get the word out to parents about what their options are and how they can access that. Because I think I think getting information to parents oftentimes is very helpful to do that through parent-led or parent-involved advocacy organizations, because again, it's that walk in my shoes kind of credibility that is very helpful. But yeah, we have a very different system here in Indiana than in California. So my apologies, I don't have really any information on how that works in your state. But that's something I can talk to Shannon about, seeing if either through Autism Speaks or through the Legal Resource Center, we could find out and get back with you. Okay. Anyone else have any questions or a difficult scenario they found themselves in? Let's see.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, well, thank you so much.
Sure.
And this will be, if y'all ever want to reference this, we will be posting all of these on our website. They'll remain free. And we have another webinar next Wednesday on mental health parity. So if you can join us for that, would love to have you. But thank you so much, Michelle.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for sharing an hour with me. And my contact information is here on the screen. So if you want to connect, offline about a situation or whatnot, I'm very happy to help. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try and help you find somebody who does. But thank you again. And I hope this was helpful. And I hope you'll come back and see some more of the webinars that we're going to be doing over the next several weeks. So have a great day. And my best wishes to you in all the wonderful work that you do for your own children and for other people's children and for our community. So thank you so much.